and she received the Mohtarma Fatma Jinnah Lifetime Achievement Award. Rubina Saidul, also pioneering member of the Women's Action Forum, was an eminent scholar, educationist, and human rights activist. She was also the co-founder of the Ajoka Theatre Group and an advisory board member of Simorg, a women's rights organization in Pakistan. I would like to now hand over to Maria, and for this conversation we have Nighat Said Khan, who is also a founding member of the Women's Action Forum. But I'll hand it over to Maria to introduce Nighat and the topic.
I mean, we're very, very honored and we're honestly very, very lucky to have Nighat Said Khan speaking to our class today. The class that I'm teaching is called Gender Nationalism and Politics, and throughout this semester we've sort of been touching upon lots of themes that emerge in Nighat Said's work as well, and the work of obviously Women's Action Forum. Nighat Said Khan is a very prominent Marxist feminist activist, one of the founding members of the Women's Action Forum as well, which you're going to be probably seeing in the presentation. She's also the executive director of the ASR Resource Center, which is a non-profit organization that has been one of the pioneers in feminist and social activism in Pakistan and broader South Asia. And she's also the Dean of Studies on the Institute of Women's Studies, Lahore. Please, Nighat,
thank you all for being here. Thank you for the invitation to, especially since both Nigar Ahmed and Rubina Saidul were old friends, and we've traveled many a road together. So it's an honor to be speaking in their name. I just want to apologize to all of you that this may be a bit of a disjointed presentation. I haven't been too well. I've got brain fog, so the focus doesn't really come through. But nevertheless, the way I intended to do this is that I want to just spend 5 minutes on a background to Women's Action Forum, just a very brief thing of what it is. And then we have a film on the first 10 years of Women's Action Forum. I'll then talk about what happened to Women's Action Forum from 91 to now, what it's been involved in, and I'll do this very briefly. And then move to Aurat March. And try and look at the dialectic between Aurat March and Women's Action Forum. There are many other organizations that I haven't picked up, which I could have, but I thought I'd restrict it to two, which are the most known, as it were, or the most public, as it were. And then I do want to talk about our archives, because our archives from our center, we're actually closing down our center, and all the archives have gone either to Government College University, or the more exciting ones are coming to LUMS. So I want to talk about those archives because I hope that the archives are for you. It's for those of you who want to work on the archives. The archives are on the women's movement for the last 20, 30, 40 years. So we're working with LUMS very closely on that. And as I said, I'm hoping that it is for your generation to look at it. Women's Action Forum Lahore chapter will also have all my archives on that, so there'll be that available too. Women's Action Forum is open to all women from Pakistan who adhere to its charter. It's non-hierarchical by design. It has no funds. It doesn't take funds from any sources except, members giving 10,000, 5,000. It collects money that way. There's no paid employee. There's no office. There's no address. And it's not registered. And yet it exists in 6 cities, which is Karachi, Lahore, Islamabad, Peshawar, Quetta, and Hyderabad. There is a difference in the chapters depending on when they came up. Lahore, Karachi, and Peshawar to some extent started much earlier, so you get even a different class background to the membership from Hyderabad and Quetta. Um, we meet in every few years. We meet as a national international convention where we make our policies, etc. It's based entirely on consensus, which means that the members must adhere to the principles and the positions, and this sometimes takes a long time because it means that you have to have a consensus between all the chapters and within the chapter with the members of the chapter. Working committee is about 15 to 30 women, but they come and go. Uh, Women's Action Forum started with 14 members. It grew to 86 by 1983. So in 2 years, it had grown to 86 members. And there are thousands of women in Pakistan who say that they're Women's Action Forum because they've been there some time or they've been to some meetings, etc. And there's no way for us to decide whether they are or they're not, because it is that if you attended 3 events or 3 activities, then you're a member of Women's Action Forum. So it's a very easy organization to get. So this is this is the background to Women's Action Forum. We were very, very active in from 81 to 91, although this was a very, very difficult time for Women's Action Forum. It was a time when Ziaul Haq had taken over in 1977, and he had the linchpin of his policies were women. They, he you may be aware of this, but he passed a lot. He passed the Hudud ordinances. One of the ordinances was the Zina ordinance, which which made no differentiation between rape, adultery, or fornication, and the punishment was 100 lashes each. So it was a very a horrific law. Plus, he wanted to pass a law of evidence, which was that two women would be equal, two women's witness would be equal to one man. Spectator sports for women was stopped. The clothes were changed. In other words, you had to wear, to cover your head, but you had to wear a hijab if necessary, and or a burqa. All spaces were limited. And the whole focus was on women's sexuality, closing women's sexuality, women's spaces, women in the public space, etc. So it was, and plus there was press censorship. There was not much press to begin with at that time, a few papers and PTV. But nevertheless, there was extreme censorship in the media. There was extreme, he even had something called the Sipasalar. Sipasalar were a group of moral police that could go into your house and check whether you're saying your prayers or not, or to officers, etc. So it was a very difficult time to definitely to be a woman in, very difficult time generally as well. Um, the I think I'll show the film now because it's looking at 81 to 91 and covers some of the areas that I have in my presentation. Has been constant struggle against Islamisation. Although they have fought every anti-woman measure with some success, they have seen a dramatic erosion of their legal and democratic rights.
state now intends to further regulate all legal, social, and moral conduct under a monolithic interpretation of Islam with the passing of the Sharia bill. Women's organizations are concerned that this will be further detrimental to women. On August 6, 1989, two nurses were raped by three medical interns while on duty in a private ward in the Karachi Civil Hospital. The ensuing uproar by women's organizations resulted in the closure of the ward. As a result of the Farouk Ordinance of 1979, Aurat, one of the rape victims, found herself charged with admitting to having had sexual intercourse and abetting the rape of the second nurse. Nafisa Hoofoy, an investigative journalist, was largely responsible for highlighting the case.
As a woman, I'm covering a lot of human rights issues. And rape is, of course, a violation against women, violation of women's rights. And when I learned about how two nurses had been raped at gunpoint in a plain ward of Civil Hospital, I wrote about it and wrote about it, and then started to get involved because it wasn't just the reporting part, it was other things that I realized that needed to be done to bring the issue to the fore. As you probably know how badly it was mutilated because of the corruption we have in the judiciary, because of the corruption in the hospital administration, the police. Nevertheless, it brought to the public a very important issue, that is nurses can get raped in hospitals. And it brought out the insecurity that working women face. मैं जैसे काफी नीचे दरवाजे के पीछे बोला उन्हें एकदम दरवाजा बंद कर दिया और मेरा एक दिन मेरे मुंह पे बारी गुजारे एक लड़की क्या कर सकती है जो दो इतने आदमी को कुछ भी नहीं कर सकती है तब से वो मुंह बंद कर दिया और दोबारा में कंपनी के लड़के मुझे एक अगर छोड़ देता है क्योंकि मैं मार देंगे मुझे और चुप कर जाओ वो बांध दिया मेरा कपड़े और एक ने हाथ पकड़ दिया फिर दूसरे ने पकड़ा
तभी वो आपके ऊपर बात पड़ गया आपके बच्चों के ऊपर तो आपको पता चलेगा कि क्या चीज है ये तो आपके आप रातों जाते हैं पुलिस की टोकरें खड़े हैं तो जेल में चली गई मेरी बच्ची क्या काम सीखते हैं तो मंगनी छूट गई मेरी बच्ची काम सीखते हैं
असर पड़ा हो तो मैं जानती ना और तो कोई भी ज्यादा नहीं लगा तो ज्यादा तो मैं ठीक रहती हूँ लेकिन अंदरूनी तौर पे तो मैं बिल्कुल एक ही ना होने के बराबर हूँ
Despite immense risks, countless women continue to work and fight the many injustices of Pakistani society. The case is still in court. It may end with Fahd going to jail while the alleged rapists may go free. The mobilization around this case by several women's organizations, particularly the Nurses Action Committee, led to a huge demonstration which brought out women's organizations from the whole political spectrum. Serious differences between them led to a rift, with the Islamic fundamentalist women separating themselves from the others.
इस वक्त ये पता था कि सामने आया तो कई जगहों से ये इत्तला पहुंची कि कोई जाएगा है वहाँ जरूर आएगी हमने अपना तारुन किया उसको तारुन बढ़ाया और हम लोग उसको शामिल किए लेकिन वहाँ जाकर जब वहाँ पर प्लेटफॉर्म को उठाए गए और उसमें हुदूद ऑर्डिनेंस के खिलाफ नारे वगैरह बुलंद होने शुरू हुए तो हमने अपना रास्ता अलग इख्तियार कर लिया we didn't feel that we could isolate this case from the overall issue of taboo, which was the Islamic laws brought in by General Aurat. That we couldn't just take a short-term action on a rape unless one saw it in the larger context of what Islamization had done to this country, about what it had done to society.
1977 was the turning point for Pakistan. General Aurat imposed martial law, justifying his takeover by saying that he had to Islamize the already Islamic Republic of Pakistan. He was supported by right-wing fundamentalist parties, including the Jamaat Islami, none of whom had ever been elected by popular vote. In one get home, the military, the mosque, and money, colluded to regiment society, erase diversity, and drive women into obscurity. Almost immediately, the government insisted that women observe the Islamic dress code.
I think the state was trying to enter our lives and our homes. And it was taking over our space, it was taking over our bodies, it was taking over our minds, it was taking up our sheer presence. You know, just the presence of women had suddenly become a question for debate, which it had never been in previous years.
There are some aspects of our West, the departing West of Islam has fought on women. What restrictions are those? That in our Islamic world that women have to conceal their full body except their eyes and face and hands. Without restriction, they can go wherever they like, they can do whatever they do, they can do any job. Eyes and face. So why is the burqa and the hijab so important with the face in their body? No, there are two things about this. Some ulama think that the eye the face comes from the sukkah, the ulama think that it doesn't come under sukkah. But even the face doesn't come under sukkah. Only eye, women can do it, and their eye also. They don't see it. They don't bother them.
देखिए अमेरिका की जिंदगी में मैंने इस आज़ादी के अंदर जो कैद महसूस की वो इस कैद के अंदर ना मुझे बहुत ज़्यादा आज़ादी महसूस करी क्योंकि वहाँ पर मेरा पूरा इंसान जो था और मेरी पूरी शख्सियत जो थी अपने शौहर के मतलब से जुड़ी मैं मिसेस नईम और जहाँ बुलाई जा रही हूँ मिसेस नईम के तौर पर और जहाँ जा रही हूँ फॉर्मली वजह से बताकर और जो भी चीज़ें मुझे ऐसा लगता था कि उस आज़ादी के अंदर मेरी तमाम आज़ादी बल्कि छिन रही और यहाँ आने के बाद इस विचार के बाद ऐसा महसूस करती हूँ कि मैं दोबारा से आज़ाद हो गई।
Adult ordinance was passed in 1979. It specifies Islamic punishment and makes no distinction between rape, adultery, or fornication. The enormity of the implications became evident in 1981 when a woman and a man were arrested for fornication, sentenced to 100 lashes each, and stoned to death. Women began fighting back. Several organizations came together as the Women's Action Forum.
There was a deathly silence everywhere, a censorship of the press. There was no way of really communicating this growing movement and its concerns. So initially, women made use of law material. We published posters, we made cassettes, we sang songs, we mobilized in small groups. And we did manage to get some of these places, because it was a very sensitive place to begin with.
The proposed law of evidence stipulates that in cases not covered by the adult ordinance, the evidence of two women would be equal to that of one man. Women's Action Forum was outraged and immediately tried to mobilize against it. This culminated in a public demonstration by several women's organizations on February 12, 1983.
This is the very first demonstration against martial law. That nobody had had the courage to come out and defy state forces, but nobody. And it was sort of the first sort of sign of emancipation, the first efforts to break through this silence. And I think that this this has been a turning point not only for the women's movement in Pakistan, but really for the revival of democracy and democratic.
After 1983, women's resistance intensified and became more public, especially on the issue of violence against women. Simultaneously, there was a continuous agitation against Islamization, now becoming more explicit. The next major legal issue was General Ziaul's attempt to introduce the Sharia Bill in 1988. But years of mobilization of the women's movement had forced the women's issue onto the national agenda. The bill, when it was passed in 1991, was in a diluted form, but especially for women, no less ominous.
It is a struggle for us to try and explain to people that in fact the implications of what is being passed today are going to be no less damaging. And in a sense, we have been living 1979 and what happened with the food ordinance, that it wasn't till 81 that we were clear on what the implications were. And again, the Sharia bill, I fear that the same is going to happen. That when the implications, and I think it's already happening, and in all the special courts and the health amendment, the eighth amendment, we indemnify everything, the state dilutes it, the government dilutes it, and our struggle therefore becomes not difficult. This is another reason why we're not been able to move forward. Because we're always trying to explain that what the intentions of the state and the government are. It works very insidiously. And to explain to people takes a long time. So, you ask me about the future of WAF, I really don't know, because I think that people have to wise up to the games that are being played. And until that happens, WAF is likely to still be fighting on this stuff. I think that what women did, or what little women did, with regard to law evidence and resistance to other laws, anti-women, discriminatory towards women, but was in the name of Islam, was not achieved because of their having perfected the better or more advantageous interpretation of Islamic law.
I think the question that really has to be asked is not whether WF should work within the framework of Islam or outside the framework of Islam, but whether or not the actions and strategies and positions taken by the women's movement in WF specifically empower women or not.
If we keep saying that we have to justify our demands on the basis of Islam, then what you are saying, in fact, is that if somebody is able to prove that Islam does not give us those rights, then we are willing to let go of those rights. This position, that is never taken. That is very clear about the rights that they want, the demands that they are making, and they are very clear on the position that we are entitled to those rights.
I think, well, WF is trying to work out a strategy. I'm not sure whether it will evolve consensus on this. I do believe that we live in a cultural framework of Muslim, and just as the various stages of patriarchy are culturally different in different environments, I do believe the responses are also culturally different.
But I don't think that Islam is the basis of identification between the people in Pakistan. We have our own identities, and that is the basic reason why Bangladesh exists. Islam was the identity or common identity that did not happen. Islam has proved to be a very tenuous form of people in Pakistan. For instance, I myself would feel more affinity with people from East Punjab moving across the border than to somebody from South Arabia.
In a country of such ideological, cultural, and class diversity, the women's movement and its responses were necessarily reflected. However, while women confront their different realities and forms of oppression, and while they continue to debate issues, the women's movement has found its place in history.
One thing that I found very interesting, I think earlier, currently occupied and the search database movement, right? So that we started participating in this. The idea that they were part of the movement, but once they saw the black card with the march and then the movement stuff, that's why they went, on separate ways. And that's very common to this day, because when you go to the development, you see the response to it. The argument is that, oh, they support the women's empowerment and they support the women's rights. But the black card very well, and it could be very effective. I think it's a good panel that solved.
I need a clarification on a point I was a little confused about something. So the documentary talked about how when the Sharia bill was initially introduced. Sorry, can you guys hear me? So the documentary talked about how when the Sharia bill was initially introduced, it was a very diluted version. And then she was talking about how the act of trying to explain was something that was so taxing as well. And then she also mentioned something about how, like, indemnification, and then the state was also kind of diluting and the government was diluting it. So I was a little confused as to what that meant exactly.
Actually, the state it was diluted, the Sharia bill, because of the resistance by women. It came up for the first time in '88. It wasn't passed till a few years later. And similarly, the law of evidence, which initially said that the witness of two women would be equal to that of one man. But because of this demonstration and subsequent movement against it, it was passed as in cases of financial matters, women will need another witness if she needs another witness. So it was very diluted. But so actually, what we could do is dilute some of them. We couldn't get rid of them altogether because we have the right-wing fundamentalists who are pushing for it. What well, this is still 91, but given the tight censorship of the press and the banning of all political events and even small meetings, WAF had to think of creative ways to get its message across. Members of WAF Lahore fanned out and held discussions with a range of women working in social welfare organizations, minority women, especially those from the Christian community. Women workers generally held intensive discussions with those we had access to. We devised the concept of a jalsa, which was billed as an entertainment activity. We said it was song and dance, etc. And the purpose was a political meeting disguised in skits, songs, speeches, and laughter. The issue at the time was the banning of women from spectator sports, the closing of spaces for women, the imposition of Islamic dress code, and the implications of the Hudud and Tana ordinances. The positive response took us back. 600 women were jam-packed. Asked, how did you mobilize for 200 women for that protest in '83? But we had been working on in small groups and having these jalsas, etc., mobilizing women in this way. It was an ecstatic moment for us because when we went there to Hall Road, we said we'll meet at Hall Road. And you must be aware of Section 144, where only 4 people can go at a time, and Section 144 was on. So we decided to adhere to that, and then we said that, okay, 4 each will go down the mall and hand the petition to the High Court, the Chief Justice of the High Court. When we got into Hall Road, there was a huge contingent of police, women police, dressed in their gear, their whatever they wear, vests, etc., helmets, and they had tear gas, they had lathis, etc., and they surrounded us completely. In 3 layers, they surrounded us. But then Habib Jalib, the poet, was brought there, and he had written a poem for WAF a year before. And he started reciting the poem and was attacked by the police. That moment, suddenly, we turned on the police. None of it was planned, none of it was organized, none of us told each other, we just turned. And then we got, some of us, myself included, got onto the mall in front of Regal Chalk. And we were the first ones to get absolutely trashed and really, really beaten up. And we were beaten up all the way. And normally it's a 10-minute walk from Regal Chalk to the High Court. It took us over 2 hours. Many were arrested. Many of us were beaten up, but many of us actually got to the High Court and gave the petition to the judge. So it was an ecstatic moment, and all the fear of the state coming down on us, just this fear that we could face this again and again, which is why you see so many demonstrations after that, because that fear was over. We got arrested again several times, but arrested in the sense that we weren't, it was arrest to put us in the thana, not in jail, and to get bail very quickly. The positive response took us back, and then we continued along that way. The next 10 years were not. We continued with protests and demonstrations, and we continued with. We used to go to the High Court, to the government house, and stand on the road, or block the road, the entry to his house, so he couldn't go in and he couldn't go out. So we would do things like that, which actually only 20 or 25 of us could do. The security at the government house was not the way the security is now. It was sort of a fairly open place that we could actually block the road. We passed statements, we lobbied, we lobbied a lot on many of these things. We did advocacy, we got other people involved in what we were taking a position on, and we managed this quite successfully. Our statements, we had a statement almost on everything, statement every day. But the Women's Action Forum is a difficult organization to make a position in, although it does. It's difficult because it's based entirely on consensus within the chapter and across the chapters. Once you have a position, a policy position, the chapters can strategize and have their own activism around it, but they can't change the policy. And to give you an example of this, there was a big debate in the Women's Action Forum of whether we should be calling ourselves secular or not. Most would agree that we should be secular and say it openly. But secular at that time, and probably even now, was considered atheist. And that was something that the state could use against us. And it's, so there was a debate on this, on whether we would say secular and be called atheists. The other is that the women we were trying to reach out to, including women in Women's Action Forum, who believe in Muslims. So they were not rabid Muslims, but they identified with Islam. And certainly in the rural areas, the urban areas, the mohalla area, they would be, it would be difficult to reach them if we called ourselves secular. So we continued to, we had two groups discussing this. Two groups, meaning one who took the position that we should have a strategic use of religion, the other that said that we should not use religion at all because we would get caught in interpretations of religion and we would not be able to come out of it. In other words, we're validating Islam as a legal entity. So this debate went on for some time in the chapters. The Karachi chapter was the first to say that yes, we'd go for secular. The Lahore chapter was the second chapter. The third was Islamabad. But just to show you how long it took, Islamabad took 10 years to decide. So it took us that long to come to a national position because in each position, in each chapter, we had to have a consensus of all the members. And this has served well. It means we can't be so fast on things. For instance, social media, we try and keep up with it, etc. But we can't just shoot off a tweet without the other chapters involved. And we try now through social media to get this much faster, but we are slow and we're sort of, we tend to be slow. The other thing is that we are not very social media savvy. So this is a difference between Aurat, March and us. We tend to sort of take our time to get it and to get the wording correct, to get the consensus. Because it's non-hierarchical, although there is a sort of hierarchy because there are those members who are not working at it on a daily basis, and there are those members who are, and they tend to be the working committee and tend to make decisions without what is called the general body. This is not something that is desired, not something that we adhere to, but nevertheless, this is the way it's actually running. And it's true also of other women's organizations that this is how they run. There was so this period was also a period where in '88 we got Ziaul Haq died and Benazir came in. And there was an opening up of spaces immediately. Like we were allowed to have our events in public places like Alhambra. We were allowed to go in spaces like we would, buses were then, more safe. I remember one incident where this woman in a bus, a man sat on the women's seat and she slapped him and said, "Don't you know we have a woman prime minister?" So those resistance like that. Another thing that Ziaul Haq did was if you went out with a man and a woman, they had to show their nikah nama. The police could stop them, and it gave legitimacy to every man to control all women. So you had many instances, myself included, where a man followed me from a shop, and I was carrying some things, and he followed me saying, put a dupatta on, etc. And I put my bags in the car, and I also turned around and slapped him. So, it was sort of at that level of even us getting violent. Uh, he fell off his bicycle. So that was a nice sort of end to his harassing me. But harassment was a big issue. Um, and the thing is that the state controlled, by coming into the home, the Zina ordinance, etc., the state came into the private sphere. It came in by controlling, including whether you say your prayers or not, but it came in. Women are considered, continue to be considered, the bearers of tradition, culture, um, religion, and so they must be controlled. Their bodies must be controlled because they are apart from having children, that you need to know whose child it is, but they're also considered the cultural and tradition carriers of that. You find that there are often conflicts and situations where there's rape, and the rape is actually against the males of the other community. We would, as I said, we pass statements. We would continue our street activism, but we started lobbying and advocacy much more than we used to, and that was it was a way of. I personally didn't do it because I thought that I'm not a good lobbyist. I lose my temper. So there were others who were nicer with this, and through that lobbying, we did get some changes in the laws or changes in atmosphere. When Benazir, as I said, came in, there was an opening up of spaces. She made the women's bank. She did the women's police stations, things like that. She opened up, but she was there for a year and a half. And the 4 terms that we had, the Nawaz Sharif government was similar to Ziaul Haq in terms of the attitude to women. I was involved with the Institute of Women's Studies, which I'll talk about a little when I talk about the archives. But we were charged, and publicly, that the minister of Shahbaz Sharif's government had a press conference, and he said that this particular organization named me, named the organization, and said that they're anti-Islam, the military, anti-development, anti-religion, and pro-Jewish, pro-India, what you hear even today. So I was summoned, and several of us went to the Chief Minister's house, and these things, 14 charges, were read out. One of them was I lead women astray. So I said that, Shahbaz Sharif, I believe that being against the state is treason, and I think there's a law against treason, and I think you should charge me, so that we clear this up legally. As far as anti-government is concerned, it is my right to be anti-government. If you do something wrong, or if I think that you're doing something wrong, it's for me to point it out, for me to challenge it. As far as religion is concerned, I said, Shahbaz Sharif Sahib, I've never called you a kafir. and I don't give you the right to call me a kafir. Military, I said, military, you should be careful with the military, because the military is like the proverbial camel in the tent once it comes through the door. He said, no, they're doing such a good job, they're building roads. And I said, your job is to build roads as a chief minister. So he then said that one of the charges was leading women astray. And I said, well, that's our job. That's what we're meant to be doing. It passed in the sense that there was no law that we were breaking. So it did go into charges. But his government attacked many women's organizations at that time. This was in 1998. So there was and women in the press, etc. So there was a concerted act by the Demonstrative government, who had said until 1999, a couple of months before he was deposed, he said very clearly that I'm going to continue with Ziaul's mission. So he was really still going along with Ziaul Haq and his mission.